This is another sign of the times, an analysis and a commentary. Arctic sea ice is at a record low. The amount of sea ice in the Arctic has fallen to the lowest level on record, a confirmation of the drastic warming in the region and a likely harbinger of larger changes to come. Satellites tracking the extent of the sea ice found last weekend, but it covered about 1.58 million square miles, or less than 30% of the Arctic Ocean's surface, scientists said. That is only slightly below the previous record low, set in 2007, but with weeks still to go in the summer melting season, it is clear that the record will be beaten by a wide margin. The National Snow and Ice Data Center, a government-sponsored research agency in Boulder, Colorado, have announced the findings in collaboration with NASA. The amount of sea ice in the summer has declined more than 40% since satellite tracking began in the late 1970s, a trend that most scientists believe is primarily a consequence of the human release of greenhouse gases. It's hard, even for people like me, to believe, to see that climate change is actually doing what our worst fears dictated, said Jennifer A. Francis, a Rutgers University scientist who studies the effect of sea ice on weather patterns. It's starting to give me chills, to tell you the truth. Scientific forecasts based on computer modeling have long suggested that a time will come when the Arctic will be completely free of ice in the summer, perhaps by the middle of the century. This year's record melting is lending credibility to a more pessimistic analysis, but that moment may come much sooner, perhaps by the end of this decade. In other words, the Arctic sea ice is melting faster and faster. It's an example of how uncertainty is not our friend when it comes to climate change risk, said Michael E. Mann, a climate scientist at Pennsylvania State University. In this case, the models were almost certainly too conservative in the changes they were projecting, probably because of important missing physics. Experts say that a powerful storm in the Arctic last month almost certainly contributed to the record by breaking up ice, but the record low would not have occurred, they say, if the ice had not been steadily contracting for the past several decades. The pace of that decline seems to be accelerating, but scientists are somewhat cautious in their predictions, given that sea ice is prone to natural variability. They have only a 33-year record of careful satellite observations, and before that, only sketchy data from maps and other historical sources. By itself, the melting of sea ice does not raise global sea levels, because the floating ice is already displacing its weight in seawater. But the sharp warming that is causing the sea ice to melt also threatens land ice, notably the Greenland ice sheet, which is melting at an increasing rate. Melting land ice does raise sea levels. Already, the reduction in the sea ice is altering weather patterns in the Arctic region, and perhaps beyond. It is putting stress on the ecology of the region and causing rapid erosion of shorelines that are now exposed to more vigorous waves. The melting does, however, offer some potential benefits, including new shipping routes and easier access to oil and other mineral deposits. A rush is on to stake claims and begin mineral exploration in the Arctic. The average temperature of the region is rising more than twice as fast as that of the Earth as a whole, confirming a prediction first made in 1896 that increasing levels of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels would have an especially large impact in the Arctic. One reason is that the white surface of the ice reflects a great deal of sunlight back to space, but the darker water and land exposed when the ice melts absorb more heat from the sun, which in turn leads to additional melting, more sunlight absorption, and so on, a feedback loop that scientists call Arctic amplification. Dr. Francis is one of a small group of climate scientists who argue that the decline of sea ice is already having consequences for weather in the northern hemisphere's middle latitudes, including in the United States. She has published research suggesting that air circulation patterns are being altered in a way that favors more extremes, like heat waves and droughts. Such ideas are not yet considered proven, but they are getting more attention as the weather careens from one extreme to another. Every year, the surface of the Arctic Ocean freezes during the long, dark winter, with the extent of sea ice usually peaking in March. Until recent decades, a high proportion of the ice was thick enough to survive the summer, but scientists say the warming trend has reduced the ice to just a shell in many places. That means it can melt easily in the round-the-clock sunshine that strikes the highest latitudes in summer. A top scientist at the Snow and Ice Center said, "Parts of the Arctic have become like a giant slushy this time of year." So again, in other words, the Arctic sea ice is disappearing, and soon it may be completely gone in the summertime. This too is another sign of the end of times as we know them, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary changes, happenings, and events, because it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations, and that should be a very important question to ask. Again, Luke chapter 21, verse 29. And Jesus spoke to them a parable. Behold the fig tree, and all the trees. 30. When they now shoot forth, ye see and know of your own selves that summer is now near at hand. 31. So likewise ye, when ye see these things coming to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is near at hand. 32. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away until all be fulfilled. 33. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. 34. And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with partying and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. 35. For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. 36. Watch ye therefore, and pray always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. Revelation chapter 14, verse 14. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. 15. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. 16. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. 17. And another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. 18. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. 19. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Yes, it's time for the spiritual and physical manifestation of the book of Revelation. Everything is connected, and everything is numbered, and all these are more signs.